Hi, everyone. Welcome. So if you guys got kicked out, so sorry about that. We had a little hiccup that happened, and now we're all back again. So welcome back to our weekly book study. It's good to see you all, familiar faces. And our co-host this week is Jenny Beal. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Bill. Hi, everyone.
Nice to see you all. So good. Love this guy. Oh, this first discourse is like, whoa, Jenny, Jenny Beal, help.
Yes, this is quite complicated, but you don't need to worry about it because what Atmananda is doing is he's very gently refuting all the various conventional Vedantic teachings, which quite a number of his audience would have been familiar with, and was probably what the questioner was asking about. But really, the vast majority of us don't need to worry about that. We can go straight to the main point he's making, and sort of hidden in all of this is a very important point. But let's start with his own definition of samadhi, because it's probably a little bit different from what you've heard before. So this comes from the index. Samadhi is the pleasurable experience either on the vision of a personal God or during the state of stillness of mind obtained by effort after prolonged yogic exercises. So that definition is based on and assumes that you've been following the Vedantic, traditional Vedantic teaching. But, in other teachings and in the West, the word samadhi is used in a much more general sense to refer to a blissful state of mind and body experienced when the sense of separation temporarily disappears. And it can be, it doesn't have to be as a result of difficult yogic exercises. It can be completely uncaused and completely effortless. But, Vedantins make it very, very complicated. And he mentions 6 types of samadhi. Well, I've come across 3 types of samadhi, which are quite well known in the teaching I was following. But these 6, I couldn't even find them on the internet. So I think we can kind of forget about them. They're obviously hidden away in some Shastra somewhere. So forget about that. Nirvikalpa samadhi is one that is important, and we talk about. And he says, according to certain Shastras, Nirvikalpa samadhi is the ultimate goal. But according to still other Shastras, there are 3 other more samadhis, again, ones that I hadn't come across. Now, Nirvikalpa samadhi, as we understand it in the direct path teaching, is consciousness without objects, or pure consciousness. So that's in the Western terminology. And that's really very close to Atmananda's definition. He says it's the state in which the mind becomes merged in consciousness for a while, and there is deep peace so long as the state lasts. And I think that's the important thing to notice, that it is a state of the mind. It's not what we're really looking for. And it is artificial. It comes and goes. It is pure consciousness, but it's conceptualized as a state, and therefore it can't be the goal. So he says it must always be borne in mind that samadhi, of whatever nature it may be, is only for the mind and not for the real I principle. Even when the mind gets absorbed, as in the Nirvikalpa samadhi state, the real I principle stands out as its witness, showing thereby that it has no connection with samadhi. So samadhi is really the name for the mind's conceptualization of that state of pure consciousness.
So would you say that it is a glimpse?
So yes, it can be a glimpse. So in a glimpse, for it to be a glimpse, there must be some understanding there. So for example, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you could arrive at Nirvikalpa Samadhi through a method of meditation. Mantra meditation was the method that I used, but there wasn't understanding there, because the teaching as it was transmitted to us didn't give us that understanding. It described exactly as Atmananda says. It fell into that trap of really saying, well, this is the ultimate goal, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You need to be in samadhi all the time. And that was a problem. So for me, that was not a glimpse. I did have glimpses, but I didn't even associate them with Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because they were ones which just happened, and happened for that reason, because I didn't have the background, I didn't have the understanding. There's I'll put this on the chat. There's a couple of very good, I mean, this is a complicated subject, but there's a couple of very good videos from Francis which explain different types of samadhi, and put that on the chat for you, so you can, if you're interested in the subject, you can watch those later.
Awesome, thank you. So
But
the experience of samadhi then is not an awakening experience, as it's
it might be an awakening experience. Is really what I would call a glimpse. I'm not too keen on the word awakening, because it's often presented as a goal, that to awaken is a goal, and awakening can only be a state of the mind, and a state of the mind isn't really what we're looking for.
right.
What we're looking for is that fundamental understanding that, firstly, I am pure consciousness. Before I'm a body or a mind or anything else, I am pure consciousness, and that pure consciousness is not limited by the body or the mind or by anything else, by time or space or anything. So that's the understanding that you get from a liberating glimpse. You can have partial glimpses, which might just be the glimpse, I'm not my body or my mind. That would be a partial glimpse, for example. But it might not be. You see, samadhi might it might not be that. It might be just a blissful experience that happens, and there's no understanding attached to it. So what's important is understanding.
Yeah. The if you don't have the understanding, it's like what you just said, that you had the teaching earlier, but you didn't have the understanding, so the teaching didn't have a place to land.
Well, the teaching wasn't right for a start.
It was,
I mean,
what?
if the teaching had been right, if the teaching had been correct, then I might have had a chance, but it wasn't. Right. It was the teaching was wrong in exactly the way that he explains. That the traditional teaching is wrong. Samadhi is not the goal, but we were taught that it was.
Yeah,
and it was a problem. Yeah.
I never heard of samadhi until I met the co-producer of of Awakening Mind Films that did the Samadhi films and has a Samadhi center, and that that experience is in his presentation and in his intensives. The Samadhi experience brings you through self-inquiry to a point where what he terms Samadhi is an awakening experience where the self is realized. So it's
Yes,
a
I mean
terminology.
that's not. I think there's some confusion in there.
In the terminology,
Um,
because the
I
experience.
think also in the method there's a danger, and this is exactly the danger that that Atmananda is pointing out. He says Samadhi is a state, and being a state, it's limited in time. Reality is something transcending time. Therefore, until you come to the sahaja state, natural state, you cannot claim to be established in the ultimate reality. The samskara, and samskara is a habitual idea or a sort of conditioning that the idea that one goes into and comes out of samadhi also has to be clearly transcended in order that you may reach the absolute. Therefore, samadhis of any kind only pave the way for your establishing yourself in the ultimate reality. Samadhi has a role in the sense that it shows you that consciousness without objects is possible, because mostly we think I am aware, but I am aware of something, and that if there's nothing that I'm aware of, then I'm not aware. That's how we normally think, and that isn't right. And it's samadhi that shows you that it isn't right, and that is the understanding. But if you haven't had that understanding as a result of your samadhi, then it's of no value.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what's important. That's exactly what he's saying here. He says it's in a later discourse. He says samadhi is all right if the mind understands that samadhi is complete identity with non-dual Atma, where there's neither the enjoyer nor enjoyment. And when the mind knows that, it is itself changed. So in other words, it's the understanding that comes from samadhi, not the samadhi itself. Right. But it is so common for people to chase states of mind. And I would say probably the majority of non-dual teachers are actually encouraging people to chase states of mind and not to go for the real understanding. And the original Shankaracharya had a word for that. He called it Ananda Maya Kosha. So Ananda, happiness, Maya, illusion, and Kosha, sheath or veil. So it's samadhi is the veil that the bliss of samadhi is the veil, the last veil that hides yourself from yourself.
Wow, that's an interesting explanation of samadhi. I'm not that familiar with it. I had no idea until I read this today. I put some stars where he said that samadhi was a state. That in my interpretation was that samadhi is a state or an experience that's also seen, and it's not the absolute. It's the first time I've seen that mentioned that way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, I mean, he's very carefully pointing out the problems with the traditional way of teaching this, and that traditional way is still out there, and I would say among the majority of non-dual teachers.
So the the
Nirvikalpa.
Nirvikalpa samadhi
Mm-hmm.
is still prior to the absolute.
Well, yes and no. You see, if you recognize, if you experience nirvikalpa samadhi and recognize that as pure consciousness, then it's not actually distant. There's another name for that, which is turiya, but turiya and nirvikalpa samadhi are in a sense the same thing. There was another description from Francis about that, sort of going into the Sanskrit and so on, but unfortunately it's not on YouTube. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. They had to, because samadhi was seen as being the ultimate goal, they had to invent another goal. So they invented turiya, but turiya is actually the same as nirvikalpa samadhi, but they're both pure consciousness. Sahaja samadhi is, you see, you can't stay in pure consciousness. You can't live in your body, and your mind needs your body needs food and your mind needs to be active. So you can't stay in nirvikalpa samadhi all the time. But all it does is give you the understanding that mind and consciousness are completely different.
Right.
That's all it does. Once you've experienced that, you don't actually need to experience it again. Once you've understood it, there's no need to experience it again. But what happens usually with nirvikalpa samadhi is that bliss continues as objects come into your perception. Then that bliss continues, and that ultimately becomes sahaja samadhi. And sahaja samadhi is when you are naturally in peace, whatever the circumstances, or whatever perceptions are arising. You are still in peace because you don't feel yourself to be separate, and you don't feel yourself to be limited.
Right.
So that's a much more important samadhi. Again, calling it samadhi makes it into a state, but in reality, it's not a state, because once you've had that understanding never goes. You might fall into ignorance temporarily, but that's just the residues of your conditioning, which come back and temporarily fail that understanding for you. But once you've had that understanding, and that's there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take it with the list and leave it in the I don't know category. Except that I like having a reference to the Sanskrit meaning, and also Atmananda being the sort of the new wave of bringing the understanding into everyday experience.
Yes.
And setting aside the rituals, and setting aside the false access, or the things that are described as states of mind that are misunderstood or misappropriated to meaning an awakening experience.
Yes, and it didn't just come from Atmananda. It goes way back to the original Shankaracharya. If you look in Vivekachudamani, you find all of that. You find all of the sheaths, and you find that understanding. So it's just been misunderstood and misappropriated over time.
Right, right. So let's keep going. You left off in the second to the last paragraph, or you ended, right? As we're talking about Turiya.
Oh yes, I just mentioned to Turiya. His definition of Turiya again is a little bit different from certainly the way even the Shankaracharya was explaining it, certainly the way that Francis explains it. But so he's talking to someone who is stuck in states of mind, basically. And so he's saying even Turiya is witnessed by the I principle, but Turiya is the I principle ultimately. It is pure consciousness. It is the I principle.
And the I principle is not different than just is.
Yes, exactly. Being and consciousness are one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's that's really the essence of the non-dual understanding, being and consciousness one.
Yeah, it's unchanging. It always is, and it just is.
Yes. Yeah.
William has his hand up. William, how you doing? What are you adding?
I can't unmute.
You keep unmuting. Yeah, there you go. Stay there.
I can't unmute.
Yeah, we hear you.
We can hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
I just added the Turiya is not a state like sleep.
Yeah.
Because it's the always awake. Beyond the sleeping, dreaming. It's what hears the alarm clock.
Yes, it's pure consciousness.
So it's not a state, really.
Yes, exactly. That's why that word was used. But he describes it, in fact, as a state, because I think probably the questioner was using it in that way. And again, it's often misused in that way. But you're absolutely right. It is pure consciousness and unchanging, not a state that we go into and out of. But I think in the definitions, he says it's a state of bliss which is acquired after many, many years of difficult yogic exercises.
But it's really the essence.
It's just pure consciousness. It's just the I principle. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, William. Yeah, this does. It is something that can be confusing because just as Atmananda is saying that it is witnessed by the I principle, and yet we're hearing both of you say that, well, it is the I principle.
Yes, it is. Ultimately, it's a stage in the understanding where the witness and pure consciousness collapse, and there is just one.
Yeah.
So he's talking to someone who's not at that stage.
Right.
But ultimately, the word Turiya does refer to that stage where the witness and consciousness are one, as William has just said.
Yeah.
There are some teachers who make a little bit more of that kind of transition. That they start with the witness, and then collapse the witness, deliberately collapse the witness, and that's a perfectly valid path to the non-dual understanding.
It says at the very last paragraph of this discourse, the samskara that one goes into and comes out of samadhi has also to be clearly transcended in order that you may reach the absolute. So one transcends the samadhi experience. That's what we're saying. That's what
what he's saying is the samskara that one goes into and comes out of samadhi, so that the idea, the belief that one goes into and comes out of samadhi has also to be clearly transcended. It's a little bit subtle, that because there is no person that transcends, and there is no person that can go in and out of any state.
Right.
So that's really what he's saying, that the idea of the person, the idea of the separate individual has to go, and the idea that that person goes into, in fact, any state, it also has to go. So he's saying, therefore, samadhis of any kind only pave the way for your establishing yourself in the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there are no real states. It's something that that grows, that gradually over time, that the states of deep sleep, dreaming, waking, they all soften and merge and become less distinct, and you feel that there is just consciousness and that it is continuous. So you don't feel that you sleep. That's something that happens over time, and in a way, that's what this paragraph is referring to. Ultimately, the idea that you go into and out of any kind of state has to be transcended.
Wow, this does. This
is a very deep teaching.
He's untangling it, and it still sounds super tangled.
Well, it does, because this is this is not beginner stuff, you've talked about this being university level. This really is university level.
Yeah, it surely is. Well, I'm happy we have Professor Beal to help us through this, the context and the content, and also having first clarity, understanding of the backgrounds of these different Sanskrit type teachings, and even the ancient traditions that are used, that are this sort of culminated in the teachings that a lot of this came from Upanishads, didn't it?
Yes, a lot of it did, but the real Advaita Vedanta was put together by the original Shri Shankara, Adi Shankara. Can't remember quite when he was, but 3rd century, something like that. So a long time ago, but after a lot of the Upanishads. And there are,
Yeah.
at the time, there were a lot of arguments between, there were loads of different Hindu philosophies, some of them, most of them dualistic, nearly all of them dualistic. And they were all arguing amongst themselves. And he saw the truth. And he formulated a teaching which actually brought them all together. It was interesting that he did that, and discarded the bits which were unnecessary. And so he was actually the founder of Advaita Vedanta. And so you can read his teachings. Atmabodha is a lovely one to read. I love Vivekachudamani. So those are ones you can look at.
All right. That sounds good. I'll look for it. I'll look it up. And we'll go deeper in our university studies. Fun. Okay. We want to move on to 172?
Yes, fortunately, it gets easier after this.
Yeah, that's why I said help. When I first saw that, I went, oh my God. Okay.
Yes. Yes, he's talking here about what he calls the cosmological path, and sometimes that's called the outward facing path. So it's going outward. If you want to find out the nature of reality, then you go outwards and you look into the world, and that's the cosmological path. So his the idea of Ishvara, which is the creator, God, being merged with Brahman, it's kind of the culmination of the cosmological path. And
would you say Ishvara? We would call that as the higher
God, as God, really. We can call it God.
Okay.
Yeah.
The outward expression, or the
yes, it's looking outward to what is the origin of the universe, to try and find what is the nature of reality. So we look outwards to the origin of the universe. What is it really? How does it fit together, etc. That's the cosmological path. Now, he doesn't teach that. There are a number of Hindu philosophies which do teach that. They're mostly dualistic, but they end up in non-duality. And so this is what he's explaining here. So the equivalent in Western teaching is really the merging of non-duality. The non-duality is the merging of consciousness and reality, or consciousness and being. So it's the equivalent there. And we look in the direct path, we look both ways. We look inwards, but we also look outwards. Well, if you're following the Jean Klein approach, you also look outwards. And the two merge. So the outward facing path is more like the tantric path. They were very much about the world and the origin of the world, but again, they came together in duality. So Atmananda doesn't go into the cosmological path. He follows just the inward facing path.
Okay. That's where the what is it? The I forget the name of the outward facing path. What's the name of it?
Well, Kashmir Shaivism
right.
is Jean Klein used just a part of Kashmir Shaivism, and in a slightly different way from the conventional way of using it. So he used it much more as post-enlightenment, living the understanding,
Right.
using it in that sense, taking that understanding into the body, so that the body doesn't feel solid. And
Right.
there's a lot about the body in Kashmir Shaivism.
But I thought Atmananda did include the outward facing path, because he certainly does describe in all of the previous discourses how to live this understanding in your everyday life.
Yes, he does, but he doesn't take what he calls the cosmological approach to that. So he's not trying to get you to feel one with the world in the same way. He's getting you to understand. It's all about reasoning and understanding with Atmananda.
Okay, and then also Jean Klein brings in the feeling part.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what else do we want to look at on 172? Ishvara,
I think it's fairly obvious that what you call something doesn't change its nature at all. So, in other words, the fact that there are two different names, Ishvara and Brahman, doesn't mean that they're not the same.
Well, it's kind of like what we're doing is we're merging our conscious experience, or our understanding of cognizing the teaching with the understanding that transcends the physical reality or the physical world.
Yes.
So we're sort of doing this in a different, not using his terms.
Yeah.
173. What is destruction?
Yeah. So really, so there are two arguments that you can use. First, that nothing completely disappears; it just changes its name and its form. And or secondly, which is the argument that Atmananda uses, which is that objects are non-existent in the first place. And what he means by that is that we perceive separation, and we divide the world into objects, but that separation doesn't really exist. It's an artificial superimposition. And so he says an ignorant man thinks that causing the disappearance of any particular thing is destruction. This is wrong. When you know things in the right perspective, you find that an object, even when it is perceived, is non-existent.
Right. Yeah, it's the interpretation that's laid on this experience that is illusory, and it's non-existent, because it's the we that you said that we perceive the experience. It's when the we is the I principle, and when it's realized, then the interpretation is destroyed, is gone.
Yes, we recognize that it's just that objects and the division into objects is just a model that we're using for convenience. And we know that, and we feel that, and we don't, it doesn't mean that we don't use that model. Of course we do. It's necessary in the normal world. But we don't believe it to be truth.
Right. Yeah. And Dave Adams and Amy just did a mirror of quotes that Rupert has shared, that which is that which never ceases to be, and that which is not never comes into existence.
Actually, that comes from the Bhagavad Gita, not from Rupert originally. That's I can't remember which verse it is, but it's a lovely quote from the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, he references the Bhagavad Gita as a reference. When I read the quote or I recited the quote that Amy used, "Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists here, and lies the peace of God." When I referenced that to Rupert when I met him, and I think I met him in 2016, he replied with that quote.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That sounds like something out of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
And it's funny, here it is again.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at 174 then. Pleasure and pain, though my experiences do not affect me. How? Pleasure and pain. And then he says, I feel pleasure at one moment and pain at another, but I am changeless all along. Thus, my pleasure and pain do not go into my real nature. So how can they affect me?
So they affect my body mind, but they don't affect me because I'm not my body mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's clear understanding, and it helps one to realize that the experience, the pain or the pleasure is really, it can be used as a pointer to that which feels is unaffected.
Yes. Yeah.
By both.
Yes.
So the next one, knowledge, 75, knowledge is not a function. This is a good one.
Yes. Here, I think by knowledge he's referring to experiencing or understanding rather than what we often call knowledge, which is like knowledge of facts, sort of facts you're taught in school, like history or geography or things like that. So he's referring to that which is aware of or which knows sense objects. And he points out that kind of knowledge does not have a beginning or an end, and that a function must have a beginning or an end, but knowledge doesn't. So it can't be a function.
Right, and he refers to it as a way of proving your position.
Yes, he's using the word function in relation to the mind. So all the functions of the mind. Says the mind works conjointly with the senses. So the workings of the senses and the knowledge alone need to be examined to prove our position.
Yeah, of knowing.
And so the senses and their workings first. So those are functions. Yeah.
Right. But because when you examine the knowing of the senses, or the knowing that is it's just the awareness of the senses, then you've moved to your attention moves to your true position.
Yes, you've taken a step back because you have seen an object. So there's first there's the object, and then there's the seeing, and then there's a step back, which is what is it that is aware of that seeing. So you've gone two steps back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then in the final paragraph of that discourse, he says, therefore, knowledge is not a function in itself. It serves as the background of all function, lighting up or lighting and coordinating all of them and their experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's just really the knowing is just present. It's just the absolute presence. It's the same as knowledge or knowing.
So yes, it's awareness or consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a question. What was the reference that was made to the Gita? That was that quote that Rupert used.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Susan has answered it with the correct quote.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, Susan. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. 176.
Yes. The sage sees the thing in itself. The ignorant man sees only the sense object superimposed upon the thing in itself. So he's not saying that the image that arises on the retina of the eyes of the sage is different from that which arises on the ignorant person's retina. It's the interpretation that's different. The sage knows and feels that ultimately everything is made out of the same consciousness. So when he says the sage sees the thing in itself, the raw experience of seeing is exactly the same as the raw experience of the ignorant man, but the interpretation is different.
Yeah. That would be similar to having information, and one has understanding and another has ignorance.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. All right. 177, Guru and Shastras.
Yes, I have my suspicion that this is the same question that asked the first question. I don't know, but it's possible. So it's obviously what's behind this is the feeling that this questioner has, I think, that the Upanishads and higher Shastras are somehow something superior and to anything that can be available now, which is, of course, complete nonsense. As Atmananda explains. But he's being very gentle, and he's saying that he's only explaining and proving these assertions clearly to the limit of our understanding in the light of higher logic or higher reasoning till they sink into our experience. So he's saying the sages who wrote the Upanishads and the higher Shastras, they were just describing their own experience. That's all it was. And he is now trying to take the real experience of non-duality and explain it in a way that is logical, which can provide a pathway to for his students to actually see that for themselves, so that it's their experience and not the experience of some ancient sage.
Right. Yeah. So it's a direct experience and
yes,
and not a concept. It's
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
All right. 178. Consciousness indispensable to any form of approach to the reality.
Yes. Now, this is interesting because sometimes it's said, and it's certainly part of a lot of the traditional teachings, that there's a path of love, which is the path of bhakti, or a path of happiness, similar to a path of love, path of devotion, and that one can reach reality through that path, and that's sort of right in a way. In fact, I think, certainly the Shankaracharya always said that both are necessary, and I think that has also gone through to the direct path as well, as he is saying here that the path of consciousness alone will enable you to be established in peace. But when he says that, he's saying that you will by following the path of consciousness alone, you will arrive at peace, you will arrive at happiness. Whereas if you follow just the path of happiness, that isn't enough. You need also consciousness. But I think you need both in a way. I think both can help.
I was reading something from Ramana Maharshi this morning that said that when your attention goes to consciousness or goes to awareness, it is awareness that brings you to understanding. It's awareness by bringing your attention to consciousness. It's consciousness that then brings you to your understanding.
Well, it's consciousness in the first place that brings your attention there.
Yes.
Really, because we don't choose our thoughts. We don't
Right.
choose where we place our attention. It happens.
Right.
And everything is consciousness. I think Rupert sometimes says everything is grace. It's another way of putting it.
Yeah. But when you just describe that happiness, by following the path of consciousness alone, you can be established in peace. That's the same thing. That's when your attention goes to consciousness, it brings you happiness. It's not the other way around, is it?
There is a path of happiness, a path of devotion, a path of love, which takes you certainly almost all the way there. But ultimately, there needs to be that understanding, and that's what he's referring to with the in terms of the path of consciousness. And in a way, by following both of those paths, by following also the path of love, it helps. But I'm not sure whether it's possible to follow the path of devotion or love alone. I'm not sure about that. My suspicion is that, in fact, if you do sincerely follow that path, that somehow the understanding will just happen, just as if you follow the path of consciousness, then suddenly the happiness will happen. I know Francis has said that we need to follow the path of knowledge, of knowing, of truth, the path of love, and the path of beauty. That all of those three enhance each other. And I've had some lovely discussions with him on how to follow the path of love and how to follow the path of beauty. And I feel that they do complement the path of knowledge, even though I would say that for me the path of knowledge is the primary one.
It seems like abiding brings you to that space of love and a connection that merges into consciousness or merges into knowing.
I think they come together. They co-arise. That yes, pure consciousness, happiness, truth, love, beauty, freedom, all of those things co-arise.
Yeah, because consciousness is moving you to the experience of abiding in and as itself. So it's sort of a movement back to sahaja.
Yes.
And it has, I mean, you could add a dozen different names that it brings peace, it brings the experience of quiet stillness and you're just content right there.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have one more. What is the relation of objects to thoughts and feelings?
Yes. So he says the question arises on the assumption that objects exist independently of thoughts. That's never the case. Without thought, there is no object. Thought itself is nothing other than consciousness. So yes, everything is made of consciousness. By object, what he's referring to is something that has standalone existence, independent of other objects. But the division of our experience into objects, or the superimposition of objects on our experience, requires mind and thought. So for that reason, they can't exist separately. So
Right.
he's not saying that the universe as it is in itself doesn't exist without the presence of minds to conceptualize it. He's not saying that. He's just saying that our particular conceptualization requires thoughts, requires mind.
Yeah. That objects require mind.
Objects as human beings conceptualize them, yes.
Right.
So the division, by talking about an object, we are separating something from its surroundings as something independent, and that has no validity. There is nothing can be independent of anything else. I mean, even scientifically, that's very obvious.
Right.
There is actually another one who meant to go to 180.
Oh, we're going to, that's right.
Yeah.
Vedanta and the cosmos.
Yeah. So this again is about the cosmological approach. And I mean, really, there's nothing wrong with the cosmological approach. It's just that Atmananda doesn't use it. As we said, the tantric teaching, Kashmir Shaivism, that can certainly be seen as a cosmological approach. And if we make use of contemporary science, which Atmananda didn't have access to, really the latest science, then we actually see that the cosmological approach comes very, very close to the inwards approach. And I think that in future, the cosmological approach can have very much more validity than he actually gives it. With people like Don Hoffman taking that approach, it's very beautiful what he's doing. and you can see actual a beautiful theorem of his model is that there is only one consciousness. It's lovely.
Yeah.
So that's something. It's way beyond what was available in Atmananda's time.
Oh, Atmananda would love to meet Donald Hoffman. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because he wouldn't say most of what's in this discourse if he would say everything different.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because you know how Donald Hoffman uses that race car image.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he brings it to another whole level, that everything that we think we see are just interpretations that this interface is giving to the thing that's being seen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So he brings it to a whole completely different level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Are there any other questions, comments? It seems body minds. Lynn says it seems body minds tend to at first favor either bhakti or jnana and cross paths in the middle to naturally experience the other. Both are important for complete understanding in my observation.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And Rick says objects require perception, whereas perception stands alone. And descriptions of truth revitalize every few decades, but the truth remains what it is. Yeah, that's true. It only comes from people asking questions from a different place, and the answers. A lot of the answers are coming are attempting to answer someone, as you said earlier, that's stuck.
Yes, and any answer is not truth. Is by definition it cannot be truth, because any answer is dualistic. Because language is dualistic, and really, what was very important in ancient times, and is still just as important now, is that direct transmission. That what's happening when a question is asked, then if that question comes from a place of sincerity, then somehow it pulls the answer from the universe. So if it's asked of a teacher, then it will pull the answer from that teacher. If that teacher is in a peaceful state of mind and not in a doing state of mind, in other words, is in sahaja samadhi. It will pull that answer. But what's then happening is that question and that answer are meeting in a space of understanding, and it's that understanding that gets transmitted, not the words. The words are not important. It's the understanding which is beyond the words. So often you'll hear when particularly people some way along the spiritual path will ask questions of a teacher. They'll wait at the end before they say thank you, because they're absorbing that transmission.
Yeah.
It's all in the silence, like with Billy Doyle, and it was it was so funny when Susan said, I've got to take out some of this silence, but the silence was there for a reason. It was there so that those so that the meaning of those words, the understanding from those words could sink in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Andrew has a question. Why does he say that the subject and object cannot be one? I don't think he says that. Where does he say that? He says the opposite of that in way past discourses. Andrew, did you see that on a discourse? Something that was said here?
If you can give us the number of it, then we can look that up.
Yeah, he says it on trying to explain Sat-Chit Ananda.
Which number discourse?
It's we've seen before. He used to say that we have to reduce objects into first reduce the object into consciousness or something before you can have the subject and the object be one. But this statement, he says it in Sat-Chit Ananda discourse. Let me see. Sat-Chit Ananda. Oh, has anyone found the Sat-Chit Ananda discourse?
What's the number of it?
Yeah, it's number 192.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
192, and towards the last paragraph, he says the subject and object can never be one. The last sentence before the last paragraph.
It says,
Yeah, I see what. Yes, I see what you mean. He's really saying that you need to experience that oneness before you can experience Sat-Chit Ananda. So it's a kind of strange argument he's using here. He says he who experiences Sat-Chit Ananda must himself be Sat-Chit Ananda, but this is not possible since the subject and object can never be one. The subject and object, by using the word subject and object, he is referring to two different things. And so what he's really pointing to is that the you must disappear, because in order to experience Sat-Chit Ananda, the you, the sense of being a separate identity, must completely disappear, because there cannot be a you and a Sat-Chit Ananda as separate things, because it's what you are. But it's a rather strange argument. It's a kind of weird form of logic. If subject and object are one, when we say subject and object are one, what we mean is that subject and object, the idea of subject and object, is just a superimposition by mind, just as objects, the idea of objects are a superimposition of mind. The idea of an object implies a subject. So once objects disappear, then subject disappears. But if you have objects, then you must have a subject, and the two must be separate. I think that's the argument that he's using. I mean, I can see it logically, but I'm not sure how helpful it is.
All right, thanks.
Yep. We'll be looking at that in week after next. I don't think it's in next week's discourses, but we'll look at it again. And thanks for the question, Andrew. Good to see you, brother. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that was sometimes it is good to sort out some of these questions. You know, it's funny when we're looking at these discourses, when we come to a point of what? Well, what is this saying? And we're sorting it out. Thank you for the clarity and the way of sorting that, Jenny, and each of these complicated discourses. Is very helpful to have your understanding as part of this this study. Very helpful. Thank you. Let's see. We have Francis on the path of love. Okay, somebody, Lynn posted something.
Yeah, she's posted a video. Yeah.
Good. The path of knowledge and jnani, bhakti versus jnani. Good. Thank you. Yeah, that might tongue and I see. Thanks, William. All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time today. It's some interesting ideas, some interesting clarity on some of these things. I'm going to go back and read this first one we looked at, a couple of them. Actually, I want to digest some of what you offered in this conversation, Jenny. Thank you for your help. And thank you all for being here today. And we'll see you next week. Next week is Susan. Susan will be our co-host next week. And hopefully she'll be out of the beehive. I was on the Zoom with Susan yesterday, and a swarm of bees like gathered around her while we were in the middle of our conversation. So we'll see you all next week, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.